Just to let people know, the meeting is being recorded, and I think Peter, you posted on the YouTube channel. So just to mention that. Okay, so I'll open the proceedings formally. My name is Joe Finnerty, based in University College Cork in Ireland. So welcome to the what's pretty much the last Friday of the month meeting. We try to have it as regular as possible of the HRUG group, Human Rights Universal and Global, the open discussion talks, closely anchored to you might say in Central South University, the Human Rights Centre in Changsha in China, and we have some, I won't introduce long-standing colleagues here. What I am going to do for today's session is to transfer over to my colleague Peter, who will in turn introduce our speaker for today. So over to you, Peter.
Well, thanks very much, and welcome to all of you, and especially to Uwe. With his unlikely background in terms of human rights, he studied actually economics of maritime transport, which may sound a little bit strange, talking about human rights and then taking this as background. He worked for the Deutsche Reichsbahn, which was the railway for the GDR, then GDR, and developed from there his career working, and there we come to human rights issues as well. Worked on the topic, if you want, international and global communication of goods. But he worked in China, in India as well, and has from there many important experience as well. What life is about, what industrial development is about. He was active for a joint venture. He may correct me. And of course, he's ocean yachtsman and marathon runner, which is not to forget, meaning he has as well this background of engaging long-term, not just the short-term issues. But so back to you, Joe, and we can continue.
Great. So thanks, Peter, for that introduction to Uwe. So we're very pleased to have such a speaker with such a varied and distinguished background to speak to us today. I understand Uwe will talk for maybe about 15 minutes, and following that, I'll throw the discussion open to the floor. So Uwe, delighted to have you. Please, the floor is yours. Sorry, Uwe. Yes, you're back.
To speak quite clearly to the microphone of the telephone. So, to the introduction once more. I worked all my life actually with railway transportation and transcontinental railway transportation between Europe and Asia, in the past Japan, Iran, then China. In 1990, I went China and took over their representation office, then a joint venture, then later 2000 I went to India and with railway, but also with sea transportation and so on. This gave me actual, let's say, the connection to the human rights when I observed how China developed, India developed. So there's a big difference, and this made me more conscious about the situation of human rights in different countries. Especially when China got this target to overcome the extreme poverty. I compared this with in Africa. I spent all the time in West Africa. More involved in this idea, how can be the human rights implemented worldwide.
The connection is very poor. Peter, can you hear more clearly than I am hearing? I don't know about the others.
No, I can hear it so far over the phone.
I have also I have trouble to hear very clear. I'm not hearing it very clear.
Yeah, for me, I think there is some delay in the sound. Maybe because of the connection.
Sorry, Uwe, it's just the connection seems very broken. My apologies.
Okay, German internet. one reason. Okay, I will speak slowly. Okay, then I will try to do this. So let's me talk now about this Chinese economy, how I see it, out of my experience, respective of my of the actual situation in China. And in general, it's always said China is dwindling, but I think this is a very wrong expression. It's growing by 5%. The product is growing by 5% last year, and for 25, actually is again predicted to have a 5% growth. So, sure, the growth rate slowed down. This is quite normal because in the past, the last, I can say, 45 years, Chinese economy was mainly pushed forward through building infrastructure, new economy, new manufacturing. But since the infrastructure and manufacturing of relatively low value products doesn't help to improve or to increase the productivity of the production. So the Chinese government, as well as the Communist Party, realized already in 2015 or in the years 2015 that new technologies had to be introduced. So that's why 2015 the Chinese government decided to introduce this campaign China 2025. That means in this years, this coming 10 years, the new technologies have to be introduced in order to improve the productivity of the production. So, this, for sure, several problems occur because the entire economy, the entire society in China is now in the middle of transformation from low productivity to high productivity, from a time of workshop of the world to the workshop of innovation, new innovation. So we see this all, there's new technologies, the new electro vehicles getting more advanced in China and exported all over the world. This transformation is necessary out of internal and external reason. Let's say the internal reason we have to see, does this non-growing up productivity. Additional, we have to see that China has a demographic problem, the aging of the population, and the problem of the environment. In the past, to this fast-growing economy was supported by energy production out of coal and very polluting. This all has to be transformed, and this is actually the reason why this transformation at the moment is necessary. There are certain external reason why this transformation is so necessary. There is first to see as China is growing, its economy is growing, the standard in China is growing, the political, also the economical power is going up. The Western, especially the USA, seeing China as a rival, not anymore as a partner and as a normal competitor, but as a rival. So when they started with this trade war in the first terms of Trump's presidency, and now in the second terms it goes on to introduce tariffs for importing Chinese products to USA. But what is even worse, these are the embargoes or sanctions against new technologies. So semiconductor, high-end semiconductor are not allowed to export to China. In the past, the Chinese entrepreneurs were quite happy to use imported semiconductor, but since this friction took place, so they must develop their own semiconductors and their own semiconductor production with own software. So this led to a complete change of this high-tech development or high-tech industry. There are certain sanctions for also biotechnic to export to China, so that China more and more has to be more independent. This what is always said in the Western countries, also here in Germany very much, this de-risking. This China understood they have to develop their own technologies, not to depend on imports and then open for embargoes. So furthermore, the entire global situation is changing from this hegemony of the Western countries and USA towards to the multipolar world. This is why China introduced already in 2013 this new belt or new Silk Road initiative or Belt and Road initiative to build new trading partner. So this for sure leads to a lot of problems in the Chinese economy, which has to be overcome and has to be discussed. Last year in July, this so-called third plenum took place. There were about 300 those critical items discussed, how to go on, how to overcome these problems, also these internal problems. There are many of those internal problems. I would like to mention a few problems, and then maybe you can ask question I could explain more in detail. One of this problem is this real estate so-called crisis. But actually this is not a crisis. Xi Jinping said in one meeting several years ago that apartments and houses are for living and not for speculation. What was the situation in the past? Those real estate companies, they almost developed to monopoly companies and territorial monopoly companies, and they ruled actually the situation in those provinces. So more and more houses were built in over supply, and those apartments were not used. So this estate development must be adjusted. So this is why the measures were introduced, and I'm sure some real estate companies came in problems. Besides that, the behavior of certain real estate companies were not according to the law in China. So this led to this situation that certain real estate companies went bankrupt, and helped them just to adjust the further development. So the first very important task for the Chinese government was to rebalance the development of real estate as well as the infrastructure construction. Then, together with or the result of this adjustment of the real estate companies is to see that the entire finance system must be readjusted, and the tax system. In the past, it was like this, or it is still so, that the main tax income goes to the central government, and the local governments, the province governments, they get only a certain part. On the other side, the local governments are responsible to develop the provinces. But this income, tax income, or from the real estate companies, since the real estate went down, so this income for the local governments also went down. Consequently, the local governments got in debts. And this was a very point and was discussed that this tax system has to be adjusted so that the provincial governments can fulfill further their task. But due to this situation, a certain trust in the government lost in the population, so the confidence must be rebuilt. So this was also discussed in this two conference which took place just beginning of March. Conferences, this National People's Conference as well as the consultative conference of the Communist Party. And there were then certain measures fixed how to improve the confidence again and how to help the population to get over this situation. So a lot of measures were fixed. How to support at first this private industry, to support the private companies to invest and to get engaged in the development of new technologies. Second, to help the aging population, as well as the young population, for improve or increase their income in order also to stimulate the domestic consumption. So these are all measures introduced to secure this 5% increase within this year. And the first results are already to see. In the first 2 months, the economy really developed well, and it looks like that this target 5% is realistic. At the same time, the foreign trade changed quite dramatic situation. So this trade between the developed countries, let's say Western countries, doesn't grow fast anymore, just very slow. But the trade with the Southeast Asian countries, the trade with the global South is increasing. So the situation is that this cooperation China with the global South in the frame of this new Silk Road or the Belt and Road Initiative, as well within the BRICS states, is increasing and is supporting the development of the Chinese economy. So this is actually the present situation. So now we can discuss about many details. And maybe you asked what would be interesting for you, and then I can come or can get into those topics more in detail. Is that okay?
Great, thank you very much, Uwe. I think perhaps at the beginning of the presentation, certainly from my reception, it was a little bit hard to hear, but the reception improved. I could hear better towards the end of the presentation. I don't know if that was the same for other colleagues. So Uwe, thank you very much for, especially as I heard the latter half of your presentation, a very interesting overview of technological developments, of economic developments in China, and a focus at one point on developments in the housing market in the context of the international political system, the international trading and economic system. So having said that, and thank you very much, I am going to open the discussion to the floor for any questions or comments or observations.
Yeah, any question? Sorry that this microphone doesn't work. It's really bad.
I can hear you. I can hear you better now, but at the beginning of your presentation, it was more difficult to hear. So perhaps some colleagues didn't hear as much at the very beginning of your presentation. But as I say, I'm opening the floor now to any questions or comments.
So I have a question regarding
yes.
the cultural attitude of the youth in China. How do you think it will be impactful in terms of the growth rate? Because there's a apparent culture of giving up, basically. The youth is in the streets. They are not participating in the market. Whatever they are finding, they are putting it in the internet cafes and so on. There's this cultural phenomenon, and it is impacting the economy based on the sayings from the government. So how do you think this will be playing in the long term?
No, I could not understand very clear. Could you repeat, or maybe Peter, you can speak about this question? I didn't get it.
All right. So I will try to speak a little slower so that the connection doesn't really do that. So my question is, there is currently a movement among the young people which are disillusioned with the current system, and they are not participating in the economy. And the government is really regretful, and they are trying to gain back these people. But how do you think this will play out in the longer run, in the 1-2 year period, perhaps?
That's the question. First, we have to see this huge joblessness. So there's always discussed the young people between the ages 16 to 24. The joblessness is between 15 to over 20%. These are only the urban population. When you look into China completely, this is one part. The big, so many millions of young people in the smaller cities and in the countrysides, they are really eager to develop China more. So you have the situation maybe in Shanghai or also in Beijing, you have the situation that there are a certain part of people who don't lie down or lay down the present development, they don't have a job, and or they didn't study the right profession to find a job. But this is a very, very small percentage when you look all over China. We always observe from the outside, they always see only the big cities. It's there in the big cities is the problem. It's over China a problem, but it isn't. Last year, I spent 4 weeks by car and went to this really provinces in Guizhou and Yunnan, and so in those small cities, what situation is there? This situation is completely different. So to reply to your question, I'm sure the government has to take care that the problem of joblessness for the young people has to be overcome. Confident because they adjusted certain rules for the education, and they adjusted the universities to have the profession that they can find jobs. On the other side, that's a big development for China still. You have to consider the extreme poverty for 800 million. But this 800 million, they have now maybe a monthly income $300-400 US. They should have at least 800,000. So this creates so many jobs, many opportunities to self, and this all connected with this transformation into an innovative society with new technologies. Only so infrastructure into towards high tech. I don't think this will be a problem for long term. This will be hopefully, and I'm convinced about this in the next few years, because it's this People's Congress. It was discussed during this last conference last July in the third plenum. So, this is my experience of more than 30 years living in China. When a problem is recognized, solve the problem. This is why I think it's not a long-lasting problem.
Great. Okay, thank you, Uwe, and I'll move on to the next. Any other questions or comments for you? So thanks, Ozan, for that question.
Well, I would have, no, there's, no, it's my hand, okay. I would have a question linked to this, emphasizing the qualitative change and including the orientation on the one hand, it's about growth, and at the same time, we have globally the problem of growth as such and the qualitative growth. And from my experience in China, there is a major change, and this links to Ozan's question in terms of the new jobs and new working conditions or working arrangements that exist. You mentioned towards your end of the contribution of your discussion answer, if the government recognizes a problem, then they move on to solve it, to handle it. And if I link this now to what I see in Europe and the United States, they leave it just to private initiatives. Just if you are in a miserable situation, just see how you can get out of it. And this is for me a challenge in terms of economic and legal thinking. We have the problems you mentioned or the challenges you mentioned. At the same time, we have an overhaul of the social security system. So the differentiation between rural areas and urban areas is being overcome, and they try to develop an integrated system for China. So can you say something on the social security issues there?
Yes, it's actually a very interesting question. And although this problem was discussed of this migration workers, we have in China maybe at the moment between 200 and 300 million migration workers. Let's say the farmers who works in the cities, on construction places, or even in factories. I'm sure in factories also a big part. What is the situation there? First, you have to see China introduced, I think at the beginning of the 2000s, this law, which is valid for all China, the labor law, is somehow a copy of the German labor law. The legal point of view, companies, private companies or state-owned companies are obliged to follow this labor law, and there are actually all the conditions given that there is a real social security. But for this migration workers, one additional problem. It's connected with this education system in China. We in the Western countries, in the Christian countries, have any small village, any city, a church, and the church has a register. There are the people registered, and this is actually this system to control the development or to monitor the development of the population. In China, it's different. Anybody who lives in a village is station in this village. He works as a migration worker in the city. Also, social security system is actually connected with this registration in his village. If a migration worker is now let's say in a big city, for example in Beijing, his social security in the village is made. This is what the company has to provide according to the labor law. He is not able, this migration worker is not able and allowed to bring his family in the city. He has no right to accommodate the family together with him in this big city, and all of the kids, children, not follow in the city and go there to the school. So there are some trails, so partly it worked, but it was not the legal system for this didn't exist. The so-called voov system. And during this was decided that certain system of change has to take place that this migration worker can get the registration now in the cities where they work. The families can follow, and the kids can go in the school there. That means that social security for this migration worker who settle down in the cities, are registered in the cities, will be secured. This is a complete, how can I say, a complete change of this system of the past. I'm not sure it will not go from one day to the other. As I realized, in certain cities, they are much faster to introduce this system. I know, for example, in Chongqing, in Shanghai, it's quite far developed. So cities not so far. So, but this it's the intention. This is got the intention to secure actual this part of the population which were in the past somehow disadvantaged. And we read always in the newspaper, at least in Germany, how this poor migration worker, they have no social security and their bad condition in the city. The government realizes this problem. This has to be changed if the society has to develop to a society with a bright or very strong middle class. So far to this.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification about the description of the developments in the social security system and impacting on social mobility, geographical mobility, I should say, in China. Okay, I'm just seeing if anybody else wants to contribute.
Well,
Uwe, can I just ask you, going back to your discussion of housing in China, one thing that I didn't hear you mention, but it was about the impact on households, on say people who had invested or put down a down payment on a flat or an apartment, given money in advance to the construction company, the developer, and then the developer goes bankrupt and they have lost their money. I mean, that surely seems to be quite a significant issue in at least some of the cities in China.
That is the issue, and also here I have to repeat, it's recognized by the government, and what is done now. At first, the provincial governments and the state-owned companies got the instruction of the central government to buy those housing which are not finished and to finalize this. When they're buying these apartments, sent to the investor who bought or to paid in already. So the government takes over this debts of the company's actual cost, or have towards to the investor, to the private families. So you have to see China is double as Europe. South and North is quite different. But the system is very clearly introduced that the local governments are obliged to solve this problem in favor of the families who invested already. So I was just months running around in Beijing, and let's say, this was the opinion, or which I explained it to real estate companies, that I look for an apartment. So we visited a lot of those new projects and discussed this. And several projects, they told us, yes, they get support from the government, but the government doesn't support this real estate companies. They support the buyer of apartments to solve this problem, also to secure the confidence of the people to the policy of the government. So this is a problem. And the government works on this in this direction to secure that the investor bought an apartment and didn't get it yet, that they will get their apartment. To a certain restriction were introduced because in the past, families which were well off, they bought a second, a third, or a fourth apartment in the hope the price of an apartment will increase and they can make money with it. There are restrictions that they cannot buy a second or third apartment and in different cities. And this is now again adjusted. So in certain cities it's allowed to have a third apartment, in other cities it's not allowed. So the intention of the government is to secure the investment of the private person, to secure that they not use their payment to the real estate companies. They did already.
Okay, thank you for that response, Uwe. Unless there are any other comments or questions, we're just coming to the hour, the end of today's HRUG Open presentation. So just checking no one has any other questions or comments.
Well, I would have one actually linking what you just asked, Joe, and what I had tabled before. Isn't there, and I say it provocatively, isn't there as well the danger of the overpopulation of the cities and the further urbanization, which is usually a very difficult thing to do to deal with, because if you have the jobs in the cities, in the metropolitan areas, more and more people are moving there, then the families are moving there. So how to deal with this tension?
Okay. When you see the civilization of China 70 years ago, about the urbanization, about 20% of the population lived in cities. Now it's about 55 to 60%, and the idea is, or the target is, to have about 70% of the population living in cities. But not only in the big cities like, let's say, Chongqing, Beijing, Shanghai, or Shenzhen, but also in the middle-sized and smaller cities. So we talk about this revitalization of the countryside. That means small cities, to develop small cities with industry that everybody likes to move or should move to Beijing, to Shanghai, or to Chongqing, but also in smaller cities. Then for instance, we went by car for 3 months from China and all small places. So we saw this, that small cities developed actually quite well. Not only that their new living condition, but also the industry or the tourism developed. so that the people move from the countryside, from the village, into those smaller cities. So sure, you have the big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Chongqing, which are huge. But still there is more or less done now. The infrastructure in the cities is given. For example, in Beijing, we live always in the outside so there you have wide streets and you have a good infrastructure to live there. That this problem of overpopulation and a very, very dense population is not so existing there anymore. When I compare what I saw in India, it's different. Since again, the Chinese government realized the problem and works on this problem to urbanization, also the population living in cities, but under reasonable conditions.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on that final point, I'll propose to wrap up the proceedings. You've been listening to the HRUG, Human Rights Universal and Global, one of the episodes in our open talks. We're very pleased today to have Uwe Behrens talking about developmental issues, technology, economy, housing, a very wide-ranging presentation on contemporary China. Thanks to people who asked questions. Thanks to people who've tuned in newly today. We welcome them and hopefully they will tune in again for our next session, which is penciled in for the last Friday of April at the same time. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, a special thank you to Uwe.